everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Alex and today I am bringing you my quarterly stats for the first 3 months of 2020. Now the months of January, February, and March have actually been really good reading months for me so far. I set out the year with a goal to not put any pressure on myself, to just read when I felt like it, and I have been feeling like reading a lot. So we have a lot to talk about today. I originally set my Goodreads goal at 75. That's half the amount that I read last year because like I said, I didn't want to put so much pressure on myself, but I have already read 46 books so far in the year of 2020, so I very well might wind up pushing my Goodreads goal up into maybe 100. We'll just have to see how it goes, but yes, I have read 46 books so far, and today I'm going to just give you a few stats talking about the different books that I have read. I'm not going to list every single book for you, but if you are interested, I will leave a link down below to my Goodreads page, as it's always down there. Go over there, find me, and you can take a look at all the books that I have read. But today I'm going to give you a breakdown of some stats, and then I am going to talk about my 5 favorite books that I have read in the first 3 months of 2020. But before we get into the video, if you're new here and you're not already, be sure to go down and hit the subscribe button and the bell icon down below so that you never miss out on any of my content. And without further ado, let's get started. So first off, let's talk about format. So how did I pick these books up? So far, I have read 8 print books, 18 digital e-copies, and 20 audiobooks so far. So the majority of what I've read has been on audio. That is actually pretty much what I expected it to be. I just recently had a birthday and I decided to treat myself to a new pair of earbuds, and so since then I have been listening to audiobooks nonstop, so that figure does not really surprise me. Fiction versus nonfiction, I have only read 3 nonfiction books so far in 2020 and then 43 fiction books. Again, that does not really surprise me, but if you watched my April TBR, I drew nonfiction out of my genre jar, so I will be reading more nonfiction. I just haven't gotten to it yet, but that again, it doesn't surprise me. I am mostly a fiction reader. As far as age range, this one did surprise me a little bit. I'm a self-proclaimed YA lover, but adult is actually the age range that I have read the most so far. I have read 22 adult books, 19 YAs, and 5 middle grades. As far as male versus female author, this doesn't surprise me either, that the majority of the authors that I have read this year have been female. So we have 33 female authors, 11 male authors, and 2 other, which I believe both of those authors were transgender. As far as when these books were published, the majority of what I have read so far this year has been backlist. That is what I kind of expected since it is just the beginning of the year. There haven't been too many books published in 2020 yet, but I have read 34 backlist titles and 12 titles that were published in 2020. As far as where I got these books from, it does not surprise me at all that the majority have come from the library. Now that does include both my physical library and the Libby app on my phone, so a combination of those make up the majority of the books that I've read so far. I've read 28 books from the library this year, and my next biggest category, I'm really thankful to say, has been review copies. I've gotten several different review copies from NetGalley and Edelweiss so far this year, obviously hoping to keep that up throughout the year, but that is my next biggest category. I've also read 5 books from Scribd, 4 books that were gifted to me, and only 1 book that was on my physical TBR of books that I already owned. I probably need to work on that throughout the rest of 2020. As far as page counts, I've always found this interesting, and it doesn't surprise me that the majority of the books that I've read so far have been between 300 and 400 pages. I've read 23 books that are in that page range, and then the next highest was 10 books between 200 and 300 pages. I've also read 8 books that are between 400 and 500 pages long, 4 books that are between 500 and 600 pages long, and then 1 book that is between 100 and 200 pages long. So we do have kind of a mixture here. I have more long books than I thought that I did, which I'm really happy about, and I definitely have some more on my radar. You guys know that I'm doing a Harry Potter reread throughout the year, so a couple of these books, Goblet of Fire and The Order of the Phoenix, are definitely going to be on the longer end. I'm also planning to read King of Crows. I'm going to continue with some Brandon Sanderson this year. I want to read A Little Life. I'm currently reading 11/22/63, so those are some longer books that'll pop up in the near future. For genres, we have been a little bit all over the place, but I'm actually surprised that fantasy takes the cake. I have read 12 fantasy novels so far in 2020, but a lot of those novels are a mixture of genres. So for example, The Diviners falls under this category, but it is also historical fiction, so we get a little mixture of everything within fantasy. My next biggest category is romance at 10 novels. The next is contemporary at 8. So I have separated those into romance and contemporary. So the contemporaries are set in our modern time, but they don't necessarily have a romance or a big focus on the romance, whereas romance is just a romance. After that, we had 6 sci-fi books and 4 mystery thrillers, 3 historical fiction, 1 memoir, 1 general nonfiction, and 1 self-help. As far as nation of origin, so where did the authors come from? Again, not a big surprise to me that the majority of the authors that I've read so far have come from the US. 30 of the authors that I've read are from the US. The next one is actually Canada at 6 authors, but this does include repeats. So Sylvain Neuvel is a Canadian author, and I've read 4 books from him so far this year, so that makes up 4 of the 6. So it is a little bit misleading, but of the books that I have read this year, 6 of them have been authored by a Canadian. From there, we have 5 in the UK and 2 from Australia. And then I also have 1 each from Cyprus, Ireland, and Israel. So I'm hoping that throughout the rest of the year, I can definitely vary up that statistic and get some different countries represented within my reading. And the last statistic that I want to talk about today is ratings. So I've been really thankful that I haven't given anything less than a 2-star this year. I have gotten to the point where I am a little more comfortable DNFing books, so if I know that I'm not going to enjoy it or I'm going to wind up giving it a 1-star, I just don't finish it. If you guys want a video talking about some books that I've DNF'd, let me know. I don't plan to DNF a ton of books, so I might wait until June or might just do a full one at the very end of the year to talk about everything that I DNF throughout the year. But if you want one sooner than that, maybe quarterly, let me know and I can do that. But like I said, the lowest rating that I've given so far this year is 2 stars, and I've only given 2 books that rating. I've also given out 3 3-star reads, which seems really low. I feel like I had given out more 3-star reads than that, but that's what my chart says. I have given out 9 3.5-star reads. So for me, a 3-star read is kind of middle of the road. I'm probably going to forget about it. So a 3.5 is, it was good, but I'm still probably going to forget about it. So I've had 9 of those. My biggest rating so far this year has been 4 stars. I've given out 17 4-star ratings. I've given out 9 4.5-star ratings and 6 5-star ratings. So I have not given out a whole lot of 5-star ratings yet this year, which is a kind of disappointing, to be honest. And I believe a few of the 5-star ratings that I have given out have been rereads. So again, kind of disappointing. Off the top of my head, I can only think of 1 book that I've read so far this year that's going to be an all-time favorite, will definitely make my favorites list on the end of the year, and I will definitely tell you about that in a second. But I'm hoping that throughout the rest of the year, we can read some books that finally pass that 4-star mark. So that is all the stats that I'm going to cover today, and now I'm going to talk to you about my 5 favorite books that I have read so far in 2020. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry by Gabrielle Zevin. This has been my favorite book of the year so far. I absolutely adored it. It will 100% be on my favorites list at the end of the year. This book follows a man named A.J. Fikry, who is a recent widower, and his life is kind of going downhill. He is afraid that he's about to lose the bookstore that he owns, and one of his prized possessions has just been stolen. But one day this young girl gets abandoned at his bookstore, and she has a note attached to her saying that he is supposed to be the one to take her in and take care of her, and his life goes on a crazy journey from there. Now, I absolutely adored this book. It is backlist. A lot of people have already read it, and I hadn't yet, so I'm very, very glad that I have. This is absolutely the love letter to book lovers, and if you haven't picked it up yet, I definitely think you should. It is relatively short, but it is so heartwarming and heartbreaking at the same time. You do get to follow AJ throughout his entire life, so there's a lot of character development that goes on, and it was just a totally gripping story, and I was so emotionally invested. I would reread it right now. It was so good. This is definitely my favorite one so far this year. Next, I want to talk about Dear Edward by Ann Napolitano. Now, this book centers around our main character, 12-year-old Edward, and at the beginning of the novel, he and his family are going to be moving from New York to California. So they get on a plane to get their move started, and the plane winds up crashing in Colorado, and Edward is the sole survivor of this plane crash. So we get a dual perspective into Edward's life after the crash, how he is coping, being the only member of his family to survive and the only one on the entire plane to survive. So he feels a lot of pressure on himself. All these people that are relatives of the deceased are coming to him, putting their hopes and dreams on him, and we get to see how that affects him in the next years of his life. And we also, in the alternating chapters, get a look onto the plane itself in the time before it crashes, and we get every single little detail. We get to know some of the other passengers on the plane. Now, this book was incredibly impactful to me. I absolutely loved that dual perspective. We got to go back and forth between Edward and being on the plane. And the plane ride, it is like down to the minute of different things that are happening. And you would think that that wouldn't really translate well, but it totally worked. We follow a whole cast of really interesting characters of people that are on the plane, and they just weave together so well. And the way that the two storylines converge at the very end is just beautiful. I adored this. I've heard several different people talk about it on book 2, but I don't think enough people have been talking about it. So if you're looking for a hard-hitting kind of literary fiction-esque contemporary, I would definitely pick this one up. Have your tissues ready because it is emotional, but it is so worth it. Next, I have to mention Becoming by Michelle Obama. This is Michelle Obama's memoir that I was finally able to listen to recently, and I highly, highly enjoyed the experience. It does obviously follow Michelle from her childhood all the way up into law school, becoming a lawyer, meeting Barack Obama, and eventually becoming the First Lady of the US. And I just loved getting to hear her story. I have always loved the Obamas, and I really look up to Michelle, and I loved getting to have her in my ear for 19 hours. It was a wonderful experience, and I loved the way that she kind of blended the behind-the-scenes story of her family, just little anecdotes from them, combined with the big events that were happening during these times that we all know about. Felt like that balance was really well struck. So just in general, I feel like a lot of people have already read this one, but if you are a fan of the Obamas, or even if you're not and you're just a fan of political memoirs, I feel like you would enjoy this one. I feel like everybody can relate to Michelle in some form or fashion, and it was just a really interesting and captivating read. I'm running out of storage, so I have to do this fast, but the next book that I want to talk about is Mistborn: The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in the Mistborn trilogy that's set in his Cosmere universe, so we follow our main character, Kelsier, who has a magical ability that will allow him to ingest metals and get powers from them. He winds up training this ragtag team, going on this heist. It is incredible. A ton of people have already read this. I was scared at first to get into it because I'm not a huge adult fantasy reader, but I did not struggle with it at all. Loved it. Cannot wait to get to the second book, which I already have on hold at my library. And the last book that I want to talk about is Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. This is the first book in the Themis Files trilogy, and the first one follows our main character, Rose. At the beginning of the novel, she's 11 years old, and she winds up falling into this giant metal hand, and they don't know who put it there, why it's there. Is there more of the body? We don't really know. But 17 years later, Rose winds up growing up to be a scientist who is in charge of the mission to find out more about it, and you go on a crazy adventure from there. I read this entire trilogy in March, so if you want my full thoughts, go watch my March wrap up, but I highly enjoyed it. The audiobook is from a full cast of narrators, which was phenomenal. It's top-notch sci-fi, best quality, just great action scenes. The character development and relationships are wonderful. Plot twists galore. This was great. If you like sci-fi and you haven't picked it up yet, what are you doing with your life? Go get it. So that is it for my quarterly stats and my 5 favorite books so far from 2020. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and let me know some of your favorite books that you've read so far this year. As always, if you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to go down and give it a big thumbs up, as well as hitting the subscribe button and the bell icon down below so that you never miss out on any of my content. So until next time, bye!